So Bernie Sanders took some shots at fragile billionaires who were crying about the idea of a wealth tax and their taxes going up. I'm going to show you that. We'll also talk a little bit about Warren released a new ad where she basically kind of does the same thing in the sense of calling out billionaires directly. So let's take a look and then we'll discuss.
It is telling the 1% and the corporate elites who, by the way, in case you haven't noticed it, are getting very nervous lately. The billionaires are actually getting very emotional. They're breaking down. They want to take our money. Oh, my God. How terrible can these people be? We only have $150 billion. They want us to pay taxes. What is this country coming to?
Now, I just want to remind everybody that even though Bernie kind of repeatedly says there should be no billionaires, his tax plan actually allows for billionaires to keep existing. And we went over his wealth tax plan in a pretty comprehensive way on this show. And yeah, you'd still have billionaires that are multi-billionaires, that, you know, some have over $10 billion still. So even though he says there should be no billionaires, his plan still allows for billionaires. So I just want to make that clear. But yeah, the point he's getting at is 100% true, because he is calling for, you know, a reasonable wealth tax, and you have this like massive backlash and overreaction from billionaires as if they're like somehow being oppressed. And even in a situation that goes way above and beyond what any of the plans do, Warren's plan or Bernie's plan, like take the Bill Gates example that he used on Twitter that I was talking about recently too. $100 billion tax on him. He would still have $6 billion. Now, again, nobody's calling for a $100 billion tax. None of the plans take $100 billion of Bill Gates' $106 billion. None of the plans take that. None of the plans even come close to that. But even if they did, am I going to be outraged? $6 billion is still more than you can spend in an entire lifetime. And then the funny thing is, and I always find this like kind of sad too, is that there is like a strong disagreement with that position that still exists in society, because people do phrase it as I just did, which is, oh, what if we taxed him $100 billion? And instead of saying like, oh, what if he still had $6 billion left? People focus on the taxing $100 billion point. But the argument I've made all along is, man, what a misleading way of framing the situation and thinking of the situation. Because nobody worked that hard. It's not a meritocracy to this extent where, oh, the harder you work, the further you go. So he earned all $106 billion. 60% of wealth in this country is inherited. And this isn't from Kyle Kulinski. We covered this story maybe 2 years ago. I'm not sure if it was Thomas Piketty or Emmanuel Saez, but these economists calculated it. 60% of wealth in this country is inherited. So that means that, you know, it's passed on from generation to generation, which means by definition, these people didn't work for that money. They're not self-made. It's just being passed on to them. And it's interesting that conservatives love to argue like, you have to work for what you get in this world, except when it comes to the wealthy. The rich don't have to work for what they get. They shouldn't have to work for what they get. But, you know, the poor should. Working class should. I mean, that really gives away the whole game, doesn't it? Like, if you actually wanted to have a meritocracy, you would have to have higher inheritance taxes. And, like, I really do find it sad and pathetic that so many people have, like, the assumption baked into their worldview is how it is right now. It's a status quo bias. Oh, how everything is right now, that's how it should be, and that makes sense. Therefore, if somebody has $150 billion like Jeff Bezos, well, I mean, he just earned all that. It's not that, you know, he's the head of a business that routinely undervalued his, the work of his laborers, that we had to force to pay a living wage, and he only did that recently. that kind of bought political influence and favor to help him continue rigging the rules in his direction. There's not a single tax plan out there where Jeff Bezos wouldn't still be massively wealthy. But there are tax plans out there now that say, hey man, you could still be a multi-billionaire, but workers have to be treated fairly. Everybody needs to have health care. We have to have free college education. We need paid vacation time by law, paid sick leave, paid maternity leave, family leave, whatever you want to call it. So it's funny to me that there's anybody who doesn't view it like Bernie views it, where he sees these billionaires crying and whining, and he's like, jeez, you're so stupid. You're so stupid. There's not a single scenario in which you're not going to be okay. There's not a single scenario. Like, the fact that everybody doesn't view it like that, and that's not, like, immediately obvious to people, upsets me. Because it means that the propaganda has been so thick and so strong for so long that people really do think, like, no, I will go on Twitter and I will cape for Jeff Bezos to keep his $150 billion. And I will fight for Bill Gates to keep his $106 billion. And you know what? They did philanthropy. You're buying into a system that allows them to accumulate that amount of wealth in the first place. We shouldn't have to rely on the kindness of any individual, unelected individual person to do positive things. And here's the other thing that always clicked with me, an argument that always clicked with me is, at a certain point, there's a certain amount of wealth that just inherently threatens the stability of a system and undermines a democratic system. Because when somebody has so much wealth, they could just buy the political process effectively. They could buy all the politicians. You've seen this with the Koch brothers. They go in and they almost literally buy up like state legislatures and have all the politicians or their little puppets dancing for them and letting them get away with whatever they want to get away with, whether it's fracking in certain places, which causes earthquakes. They don't care that the people are against it. Doesn't matter, because the Koch brothers bought the state legislatures. Do you not see now how extreme wealth is inherently a problem? Do you not see that? That you're granting people in society way more power than any individual should have. And that undermines a system functioning properly. Do you not see that? Because that's a really important point and is rarely made. That having high taxes on the wealthy is also an attempt to make us more of a meritocracy. To make it more equal, to make it more of everybody gets a fair shot. When you have the extreme wealth inequality and income inequality, you have a system that is compromised up front. The well is poisoned up front. And there's no way you're going to have a system that functions the way it should for everybody in the society. There's no way you're going to have it. So anyway, Bernie absolutely nailed it there. Now, let's also just go directly into the Warren ad. Warren released an ad going after billionaires too. Take a look.
It is time for a wealth tax in America. I've heard that there are some billionaires who don't support this plan.
The vilification of billionaires makes no sense to me. It's bull.
She would ruin what we have.
She probably thinks more of cataclysmic change to the economic system as opposed to tinkering.
Well, I'm most scared by Elizabeth Warren.
So here's the deal. You built a great fortune. Good for you. A guarantee. You built it, at least in part, using workers all of us help pay to educate. Getting your goods to market on roads and bridges, all of us help pay to build. We're Americans. We want to make these investments. All we're saying is when you make it big, pitch in 2 cents so everybody else gets a chance to make it.
I'm Elizabeth Warren, and I approve this message.
Now, keep it real. That's a good ad. That's a solid ad. There's dialogue on left Twitter about how, well, look how much further Bernie goes. Because when Bill Gates cried about Warren's specific wealth tax, she responded like, oh, I guarantee you wouldn't be paying $100 billion, and then was like, oh, let's have a meeting. And Bernie's response was like, even if you paid $100 billion, who cares? You'd have $6 billion. So people were like, ooh, look at the difference. And Bernie's further left, and those are stronger words. I totally agree with that, but we also have to be objective enough to understand that that's a good ad. Like, that's a solid ad that's going to appeal to a lot of people. Because a lot of people do need to be more eased into it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just the point I was just getting at, how it boggles my mind that some people have to be eased into the idea that, like, certainly nobody should have $100 billion. Like, they need to be eased into that, but they do. Some people do need to be eased into that. It is what it is. And she's going to appeal to that subset of the country. She's going to appeal to that because of the way she frames it. Oh, 2 cents. 2 cents on every dollar. Just pitch that in. But I can't escape this segment without giving you guys the reality of the situation, which is this. Here's the billionaire count for donors to all the candidates. Number 1, Pete Buttigieg. 23 billionaires have donated to him. What a giant fraud he is. Cory Booker, 18. Kamala Harris, 17. Michael Bennett, 15. Joe Biden, 13. John Hickenlooper, 11. Beto O'Rourke, who's now out, 9. Amy Klobuchar, 8. In this election cycle, Elizabeth Warren has 2 billionaire donors. By the way, I don't know what the dollar amount is because it didn't list the dollar amount. But, in her entire career, how many donors, billionaire donors, have given some one donation or another to Elizabeth Warren? 30. 30. Now, do I think that she's totally compromised and will 100% do the bidding of billionaires? No, I don't. And I think anybody who tries to overreach and make that case is being silly. But I do think it is telling that her number is 30 and Bernie Sanders is 0. And that does show that he is further left, and he actually is probably going to fight even harder on this front for even further left plans, which I think are positive, which I think are good. And by the way, there was a billionaire donor who tried to donate, I think the number was $470 to Bernie's campaign. This just happened. He returned the money. Now, by the way, I think that might be like, legitimately be like the one billionaire, and there's probably more than one, I'm being unfair, but who are a traitor to their class and who are like, no, I don't even think I should be a billionaire. This is ridiculous. I shouldn't have this much money. I'm sure there's some out there like that. But Bernie, as a matter of principle, was like, nah, I'm not going to take the money. I'm not going to do it. I mean, Warren's okay. She's doing all right here, but there is only one America's dad, Bernard Sanders, and I think that's clear.